Okay, well, good morning, everyone. Sorry for the brief delay. We had a little bit of technical difficulties, so now that we're getting started. Thank you, first of all, for everyone for taking some time out of your nice spring Saturday morning and joining us for some information about the upcoming fire district referendum. First of all, for those that haven't met me, my name is Steve Evans. I'm the chief of the Winfield Fire Protection District. I became the chief in January of 2020 after the retirement of our previous chief, Chief Bill Demenza. So I've been with the district about 28 years. I was hired in September of 1993. I was part of the first group of people that were hired to specifically full-time, specifically to work on shift. Over the years, we had been a volunteer fire department. We had evolved into a paid-on-call fire department, largely due to the number of calls we got from a day-to-day basis. And then as our call volumes continued to increase, we began to hire full-time staffing so that we had people on duty at the station to be able to respond to calls without any further delays. So a couple things about the fire district. We're about 13 square miles in area. We go essentially from Gary Avenue and Geneva Road on the east to Indian Knoll on the west, and from just this side of St. Charles Road to the north to Mack Road to the south, about 13 square miles in area in total, and about 30,000 people that we protect. In 2020, last year, the full data, we ran in excess of 2,100 calls, and our on-duty staffing is one fire engine with two firefighter paramedics and an officer on them, and one ambulance with two paramedics. The reason we have those numbers of people on the crews is in order to be able to send and receive mutual aid fire equipment, you have to be able to respond with 3 people, according to our agreements. And similarly with the ambulance, you have to respond with 2 paramedics on it. So that's why we're at the staffing level we're at, the 2 crews. Interesting thing about Winfield is we respond with our companies are what we refer to as jump companies, something that is not unique to the fire service, but it's unique to a little unique to our area in that we act as jump companies. So what that means is this: if our ambulance is out on another call and we get a second ambulance, which happens very frequently, our engine crew can jump off of the fire engine, jump onto our second paramedic unit, and respond to handle second ambulance calls. So all of our people are trained for that jump company concept. So if we have a fire in a rural area where there's no fire hydrants, our fire engine can go so they can get on the scene and start putting water on the fire and start firefighting operations. And our medic crew can jump off the medic onto our tender vehicle, or pumper tender, respond, and they can bring water out to the scene, establish a water supply, and then start shuttling water back to the fire scene so we can continue to put water on the fire. So that's the way we operate, is we're very efficient in that sense, that all of our people jump. In addition to those, we also jump to a brush fire vehicle, and we also jump to a dive vehicle. Now, we have a dive team and we have a dive squad to respond to dive incidents. Unfortunately, that vehicle is very busy. Well, more busy than we wish it was. Essentially, in the fire service in this area, there are 3 specialty teams: hazardous materials response, technical rescue. So if someone gets stuck in a trench collapse, gets stuck on the side of a building, that kind of thing is technical rescue, and the other 3rd team is dive. Typically, agencies in our area will devote resources to one or all of those teams so that when we all call, we can all help each other out. Our specialty is dive, and unfortunately that is and has historically been the busiest of the 3 teams. So all of our people are trained and capable of responding in all of those different vehicles and to fulfill all of those different roles on any one of those different scenes. So we're a very active department, and we're able to move around a lot so that we can actually perform as a bigger department than we are in terms of our footprint. A common question that often happens to that gets asked of us is, On a medic call, why does the engine go with the ambulance? Well, there are a bunch of reasons for that, and it's an excellent question. We get asked that very often. A lot of times when we're out and about, and in terms of this, the recent informational sessions we've been giving is a very common question. So the answer to it is simply this. If we get dispatched to a person who fell, that's an engine and ambulance response, not just for us, it's also for our neighboring agencies, Wheaton, Carroll Stream, West Chicago, Warrenville. That's a standard response for a fall patient is an engine and ambulance. And the reason for that is when we get there, where did they fall? Did they fall in a basement and they need the extra people to get them up out of the basement and out to the ambulance? Did they fall in a bathtub? Very common. The reason why they fell is what if they're having a cardiac event and you need those extra people to perform medical interventions. So for all of those reasons, we in the fire service like to be proactive. So we send the resources that we're going to need in worst case scenario. And then once we get things stabilized, get the patient out to the medic unit. If they don't need the extra crew, that engine can then become available. And the reason they all respond out there together is our engines, number one, our advanced life support. And what that means is they have the same ability to do medical interventions as an ambulance does. The only difference is they can't transport. So that ALS company is available. So then if a second call comes in while they're still out there, they can respond while they're waiting for a second medic unit to respond without losing any patient care or patient treatment. So that's a very common question we get, and that's why. So we're always ready to go so that when the engine goes out, even if we're going out to pre-plan a commercial building or just out and about in the area going to a public education event, the engine always goes together because they are all, the crew is there, the apparatus is there, and they are available to respond as soon as the tones drop. So the point of the referendum request that the district is seeking is, as I said a minute ago, we ran in excess of 2,100 calls last year. We're amongst the busiest of the fire departments in the county. The problem with that is our neighboring agencies, and specifically Wheaton, but Carroll Stream and West Chicago as well, respond to us on a consistent basis, typically daily with multiple different fire and EMS companies. So they respond with multiple different pieces of apparatus with multiple crews on them multiple times most days. All of that has led us to the point where we are aware and our neighbors have encouraged us to examine our process, and we've come to the conclusion we need to add that third company for that reason. Now, adding a third company alone isn't the only part of this dilemma. We operate out of the station downtown Winfield. And this station, and I would encourage everyone to stop by and visit, you should visit anyway just to see your firehouse. This station is at its maximum capacity. We can't fit any more people than the people we have on duty currently. And even if we could, if we put them in sleeping bags and sleeping in the kitchen, we don't have anywhere inside the building to park the vehicles, the medic units or fire engines that they would need to respond on. So that led us to the next part of our dilemma, which was what do we do in terms of staffing and putting them somewhere? Well, we've had a lot of builders and architects out. We've had some very nice people that were affiliated with the village that came out. We've had other people outside of that, several different entities and agencies out to investigate and give us some basic pricing information. And essentially building a new firehouse would cost in excess of $7 million, and that's just too much money. So we have a facility on the south side of our district by Roosevelt and Winfield that is in generally good shape. The garage area is in very good shape. It would need some modernization because that was built as a volunteer firehouse. So it would need a little bit of modernization to be able to house crews for around the clock, 24/7, 365. So for a fraction of the price, we can put the people down there, and there's more than enough existing garage space to hold their equipment, and it would just be a matter of building out the space to accommodate people around the clock. We can do that for a fraction of the price, and it gives us the added advantage of being able to cover our entire district better, because again, it's a large area out of one firehouse. Interesting thing about that is I would encourage people to go to our website. Under the About Us and the data and statistics portion of the test, you will see a study we had commissioned by the Illinois Fire Chiefs Association in terms of station distribution and response time analysis. What that is about is this. Essentially, the National Fire Protection Association, otherwise known as the NFPA, and the Insurance Services Office, otherwise known as ISO, have response time standards that we are supposed to meet. Supposed to meet for our community. It has to do with your ISO rating, which has to do with your insurance rating, and it has to do with identifying how well we're getting to people soon enough. So those standards differ, but there are either having a fire engine 1.5 miles travel distance by road from a house, or 4 minutes or less of travel time traveling at 35 miles an hour. So according to either one of those standards, responding out of this station only meets a small section of our fire protection district. By staffing here and there, it will meet 88.4% of our district in terms of meeting response standards that are necessary. So for a variety of reasons, both economic and strategic, that was determined to be the better solution to save the folks money and better be able to cover our entire fire district. So essentially, the referendum request is to add the staffing that we have identified that we definitely need, and to be able to put them at that south side station. So that's essentially what the referendum is asking for. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions anyone has. Yes, yeah, if you have any questions, please raise your hand or type it in the chat box, and I'll be happy to answer any questions as they come in.
How do I raise my hand?
There, you could just. Oh, you can just raise your, type something in the chat box or ask away. Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, question. I've got two totally different opinions about this referendum. One says you guys have so much money, there's no need for this. The other one says, of course, you really, really need it. How do I find out the truth, which probably lays in between, but where do I get statistics as to your financial capability?
So, excellent question. So there's a couple of things that I will answer your question with. One, first and foremost, and I would encourage this anyone, reach out to us. You can come in, you can look at everything. We can walk through all of the financial figures. We can go through the firehouse. We'll show you anything that you wish to see. We would do that regardless. That's the type of agency we are. Second, we have a lot of financial information on the website. We have a lot of statistical data also on that about us stats and data section. You'll see in addition to that analysis, there's also a big spreadsheet which details a lot of the kind of information about where our situation is relative to other fire departments. So with that, we obviously get audits annually. We're required to, and we should. And as a result of our last audit, we actually reached out to our auditing firm and they advised us that we have 4 months of reserves. So I can show you that as well. So part of the problem is this. There are a lot of expenses, obviously, that a fire department has. So for example, a fire engine would cost, modern pricing is in the neighborhood of about $600,000. The ambulance is $200,000. A pumper tender, which we have to have because of our large area of unhydranted area, is about $800,000. We don't have a ladder truck. If we were to get a ladder truck, that's $1 million vehicle. The kind of ladder truck like some of our neighbors have, which is referred to as a tower ladder, which is a ladder truck with a big basket on the front. You'll see them driving around. That's $1.5 million vehicle. So we will build up reserves to a certain point so that when we come to a point where we need to purchase a new vehicle, we can expend that money. To your point, if we have available our tentative budget for the 2021-2022 budget year. So if you were to look at that, and I would encourage you to come in, I can give you a copy. I'll walk you or any of our residents, anyone that's interested, through the whole thing. And you will see at the end of next year, we anticipate having $27,000 in operating funds left at the end of that year. To that point, adding an entire additional crew and having the facilities and infrastructure to support that crew to operate 24/7, 365 is money that just doesn't exist in our current budget. Our budget was not even designed for the staffing that we have, because when the tax cap took effect in 1991, we didn't yet have around-the-clock staffing. So in order to add a big amount of on-duty staffing is what is behind the request, if that helps answer your question.
Well, it does. However, where did this person who sent this election stuff out get these figures that says you have thousands of dollars to work with and don't need more money?
Yeah, that's a question we've gotten a lot. We've been out doing driveway events, and I've tried to make myself available to the public as much as I could. And the simple answer to that question is I'm unclear on where he got his figures, and I don't necessarily agree with those conclusions.
Okay.
Again, please come in and we'll walk through it. I'd be happy to do it with you.
Yeah. The South Side Station, the last time you had that on the referendum, it wasn't clear to me. I mean, I would love to have that operating. My daughter lives on the south side of the tracks. I live on the north side, so I'm fine. But it was not clear in your question, how do I put it? In what you were asking for, that it was for the South Side Station that was already existing.
Yeah.
I knew that, but in the brochures that came out or in the new, it didn't really say that. So if you ever do that again, please make clear that the building is already there, as you just told us.
Yeah, and I freely acknowledge the fact that, we have 15 full-time firefighters, again, 5 a shift. We have 15 full-time firefighters and 10 part-time firefighters. So when our firefighters, the full-time firefighters, are off on a vacation or something, the part-timers will work those shifts to avoid overtime costs and that kind of thing. And where I'm going with all of this is that the 15 of them and me at the moment is our staff. And there's not many of us, and we have done a poor job of explaining what it is that we're asking for and why it is that we're asking for it. And I acknowledge that, and we're trying, and I appreciate that. I sincerely appreciate the feedback, because we're trying, and we just hadn't gotten our message out. And again, I'm not advocating for, I'm not advocating against. I just want everyone to know what it is that we're asking for and why. And that's going back to this morning. That's what this is all about, is trying to explain ourselves so that we can, so you can know this. And we didn't do a good enough job of that over the span of our history. That's true. Oh yeah, there was another question we got with respect to reserves. We do have reserves. So we have reserves that are on hand, split 3 ways. One is for station repairs and improvements. One is for apparatus replacement, and the rest is a financial reserve to cover operating expenses. So we do have money in the bank. That is true, but it's dedicated for something. And again, going back to our auditing firm, according to them, in terms of covering operational expenses, we had at the conclusion of their last audit 4 months of reserves. Again, I just want to be clear about that, and would encourage everyone to come and investigate for themselves.
I would like to commend your EMTs. I have used them 4 times in the past year, unfortunately, but they have been absolutely wonderful, and we're here within minutes. Of course, I live right near the hospital, so that helps. But every experience has been really, really good. So I wanted to let you know that.
Thank you very much, and that means a lot to me, and it means a lot to us. And this is something that actually only recently, again, going back to we're firefighters, we don't do such a good job of communicating all the time. That's something very meaningful to me. It's very meaningful to us. And I want to express to you, and this is sincere, without take all of the what we're here talking about in the referendum stuff for, against, all of the other stuff aside, is we strive very hard to still be that small town kind of fire department and have that philosophy, and that regardless of whatever happens, you will always get that out of us, because we are a little unique in our area in that we are dedicated to that very personal care and service to our community. So hearing that makes me very happy and proud, and that's what we strive for every minute of every day.
Okay, I'll try to stop talking and let somebody else ask questions now.
Phyllis, this is Kay. I think you're asking great questions. Thank you. Chief, I've heard, and I was wondering if you could explain this, that and maybe it's legally not allowed to speak either for or against the referendum, but just explain the facts. I was wondering why that is.
Well, again, because I guess you could say that we have a vested interest in getting the increased funding levels, and at the end of the day, we're public servants and we're here to provide a service. So advocating for something that would benefit us is improper. And that goes back to a lot of the difficulties that we've had trying to explain ourselves, is we don't want to cross that line because we just don't want to. That's not how we are. And we have these needs, and we want to try and explain those needs to the best of our ability without crossing that line, not only legally for them, but ethically for us. We don't want to come off like we're trying to advocate for something that's going to benefit us. We're just trying to look, this is what we do, that you're who we serve. This is what we feel we need to have to serve you to our best ability, and answer your questions and let the folks make up their mind about it. Oh, we have that. Can you please explain how opening the South Station can improve response times capabilities to the entire district, both north and south of the tracks? Excellent question. So to get a little bit more into the details with respect to our calls, so a lot of calls, about 75% to 80% of our calls from year to year to year are emergency medical calls, and the balance is fire calls and other calls like dive calls. So a lot of calls that come in, cardiac in nature, falls, automobile accidents, there's a long list of responses that require an engine and ambulance to respond for all of the good reasons. So we can get people there. We have enough people to provide appropriate patient care and handling, all the other stuff. So as soon as we respond to one call, we have nothing left. So automatically, if the second call comes in, we're automatically reaching out to our neighboring agencies, all of whom are coming from some distance. Now we have the Wheaton Station, Station 38, the Wheaton Station behind Target. After that one, we have Station 28, which is on Coon Road, north of North Avenue. After that, it gets to be some distance. Both of those, by the way, are busy houses. After that, it gets a little bit of a distance for companies to respond in. So the concept behind adding the third crew is to better handle our calls. Now, if a fire or a major hazardous materials incident or dive call or something, a major call rolls in, our neighbors will still respond to help us. Unfortunately, we've had an incredibly active last few weeks where people have been coming to us for fires, and we've been going to them for fires. We had one last night. So things have been really busy. Those types of calls aren't necessarily what we're talking about. We're talking about the day-to-day routine emergencies, regular calls, carbon monoxide detector activation, residential smoke detector activation, EMS calls, that kind of thing. With the addition of that company, we have someone in town that's that much closer to be able to respond. So if our engine and our medic unit are on Oakwood for a fall patient, and we get a second call, again, going back to North Woods over in Shelburne, the ability to have those extra companies again, and that south side company is designed to be, just take a step back, what we're advocating for in this referendum request that we're seeking is to add one crew at the south side station, which will also be a jump company to what we've been talking about. So if a fire call comes in, they can jump on a fire engine or fire apparatus and respond to the call. If an EMS call comes in, they can hop on an ambulance and respond in an ambulance. Again, the jump company concept, so we can do bigger work with a smaller footprint. So the engine and the ambulance are on Oakwood for the fall patient. Second call comes in for, again, just normal day in and day out calls for a chest pain call in Shelburne. The ambulance can respond, and it's that much closer, so rather than having a medic unit come from Station 5 in West Chicago, which is the station behind Menards at North Avenue, and responding over to that medical call, we have the one that's just down at Roosevelt and Winfield that can respond up, heading over to Shelburne, and the engine can, when they're done and they're released by the medic group, can jump from the Oakwood call and respond over, and then we can have that same level of service en route from a closer distance. So that's the benefit of having all of these companies. The additional company in town is we can better handle our day-to-day calls. So another question came in about boundaries. I had mentioned it again. Our 13 square mile area goes from essentially the Great Western Trail, just this side of St. Charles Road to the north, out to Gary Avenue and Geneva Road, a little bit north of Gary and Geneva on Gary Avenue to the east, down to Mack Road on the south, out to Indian Knoll Road to the west. Again, 13 square miles in total. All right, any other questions? Waiting. Oh, yes. So another question just came in. Thank you for that. Do we cover Marion Joy Rehabilitation Hospital? In fact, we do. There are, if you look at a map, and if you go to our website, you can find a map. If you look at a map of our fire district, you'll see two separated, somewhat separated areas. One of those is the Marion Joy Rehabilitation Hospital campus, which includes the Franciscan Sisters, and the other one is the Wheaton Sanitary District off of Schaffner Road. Both of those are in our district and do contribute to our call volume quite a bit. So even though Marion Joy is close to the Wheaton Fire Station behind Target, that is in fact in our Fire Protection District now, follow-up question to that I get asked routinely is, why us and not Wheaton? Well, like Northwestern Medicine across the street, Marion Joy Rehabilitation Hospital and Franciscan Sisters property is not taxed. So it's in the unincorporated area. It is not part of the city of Wheaton, and they don't pay taxes. So the city of Wheaton has been fairly straightforward about the fact that they don't want it. We're the fire district that is there, so it's within our jurisdiction, and that likely won't change anytime soon. To that point, Northwestern Medicine, even though, because Northwestern Medicine does own Marion Joy Rehabilitation Hospital, and they're somewhere in the process, I believe, of buying the entire campus, including the Franciscan Sisters section, for, I assume, future development. That's a question for them to answer. But understanding that they have an impact on our organization, we have worked very hard, and they've been very good partners to deal with in their defense for a grant. So we're currently 2 years into a 5-year grant period where Northwestern Medicine awards a grant of $450,000 a year for a 5-year period to the Winfield Fire District to cover EMS and fire prevention related expenses. So we have to use the funds for those purposes, but we have worked out an agreement where they do compensate us to some degree for the impact they have on our fire district. See any other questions? Waiting.
Chief, this is Kay again. I understand the vehicles are in pretty bad shape. Could you talk to us about that?
Yes, thank you. So our current fleet, we have, if you look at the south side station, you would notice that there's 2 vehicles parked in there. If you look in the window, or again, give me a call, I'll take you on a tour. You'll notice 2 vehicles in there. One of those vehicle on the right looks like an ambulance, and it is a converted ambulance. That doesn't belong to us, it belongs to DuPage County. So within DuPage County, there is a fire investigation task force that investigates when there's a fire. They get called out to the scene and they go and they do a complete investigation. Now that team is comprised of firefighters, and we have a couple of our firefighters that are members of the team. Firefighters, sheriff's deputies, evidence technicians from the county, and state's attorneys, members of the state's attorney's office. So they go out and do this comprehensive investigation of the scene to determine cause. And then if it's anything other than accidental, it goes from there, but that's the reason the team exists. So they respond in that vehicle, because that vehicle has all of the evidence bags and evidence cans and tools and equipment, forms, computers to do witness interviews. So they'll respond, they'll grab that vehicle, respond out to the scene and conduct their investigation. That belongs to the county, and it's parked there because we have the space and we are part of the team. So that's what that vehicle is. And then next to it on the left, you'll see a fire engine. That fire engine is a 1991 Pierce fire engine. That's actually the fire engine that I started on. That vehicle is completely non-functioning. Back in 1991, they used to make the water tanks, we call them booster tanks, out of steel. Over the years, that corroded and rusted away, and unfortunately, the leak affected the frame rails. So that engine does not hold any water. The frame rails are rusted to the point of it not being roadworthy, and the front axle is in need of repairs because it's falling off. So that would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to fix that vehicle, and it's just not worth it. So it sits where it sits until we pay to have it removed. Typically, agencies will have a reserve engine, because if your engine has to go in for routine maintenance, if it breaks down, if it has mechanical failure, you have a vehicle on hand that you can use as a reserve while that's out for service. That is our reserve, and it doesn't function. Moving up to the north side, we have a pumper tender, which the crew is actually responding in today. So again, we have a big area that doesn't have fire hydrants, and that vehicle is designed to haul water for a scene. Now it can function as a fire engine if it has to, but it's not designed to do that, and it doesn't do it particularly well. The vehicle itself is in good shape, and it's a very nice vehicle. It's just not designed to be a day in and day out fire engine, and that's what we're using it for now. The fire engine we do have is actually, as we speak, it's in Wisconsin getting major repairs to corroded frame rails, corroded substructure, an engine repair, some suspension work, and general issues regarding corrosion and wear and tear. A fire engine is generally considered good for frontline service for about 10 years, and then about another 10 years in reserve status. And then that's generally the replacement cycle for about a 20-year vehicle. Our primary engine is 12 years old, and again, it's getting a major overhaul up in Wisconsin as we speak. So it's already past its frontline service life, and then when it comes back, we'll be back in that. We are budgeting, going back to an earlier question, we're budgeting for next year to buy a new fire engine so that we can get rid of the one that doesn't work down south. Use the one that's coming back as our reserve for the rest of its life, and then getting a new one, which takes a year to a year and a half to build. And that is going to expend a lot of those resources and a lot of those reserves that we have by design. We try and put some money away over the years, and then when the time comes, we purchase. Now, that leads to a follow-up question about leasing versus purchasing outright. And that's something that we haven't bought a vehicle in over a decade. So conditions have changed. But one of the things we have to look at is, again, a $600,000 fire engine. Most of the manufacturers will offer discounts or prepayment discounts. So if when you sign an agreement to buy, because these are all custom vehicles that we have to design, and then we'll send it out to the different manufacturers and they come back, we will build you the vehicle that you want, and this is what it will cost you. We go through a request for proposal and a bid process to select the manufacturer to build the truck. It's not like going to the local dealership and saying, you know, I'll take the red one and driving it off the lot. These things have to be built and designed for our community. Again, in our case, there are especially unique things that it has to have because of that huge unincorporated area. So we get again, about the going rate is about $600,000. So if you pay in advance before they start building it, oftentimes the manufacturers will offer a discount. Could be 5% prepayment discount. So instead of paying $600,000 for that vehicle, you could pay $570,000 for that vehicle, as opposed to leasing, which generally speaking, the fire apparatus manufacturers, leasing is a bit of a misnomer because it's actually just a car payment. Generally, you can have a turn-in lease, but those are not recommended by most of the manufacturers. So, and there is an interest rate. Again, going back to the regular civilian automobile market, you know, they don't have deals where they can have 0% financing for X number of months. These are because they're unique, and the resale market doesn't really exist very well for these things. There is an interest to be paid. So if you were even paying just 2% on a 7-year lease, say that would be in the neighborhood of like $45,000 in interest payments, because it's a lot of money. So that difference of that $75,000, well, do I want to use that $75,000 difference for the interest rate payments and not getting the prepayment discount, or can we use that $75,000 to say buy turn-out gear for our entire department, or the roof repair that we need to do? So that's some of the stuff that we have to look at, and I and the board of trustees have pledged to investigate all of those options when the time comes. But those are some of the considerations that aren't necessarily talked about that we need to take into account for in determining what's the best financial plan moving forward for us. So going back to the original question, I got sidetracked, but going back to the original question, our fire fleet is in rough shape. We have the tender, which is in good shape, but it's not designed to be a fire engine. Our fire engine's in the middle of getting repairs, and when it comes back, it should really be in a reserve capacity, and we need to buy a new fire engine, which we're planning to do this coming year. Similarly with our ambulances, we just got approval to proceed with the purchase of new ambulances. Now, ambulances typically have like an 8-year service life, because contrary to what some people think, we're actually a busy urban department, as are our neighbors. So the general service life of an ambulance in our area is about 8 years. And we have one that's, 15 years old, and one that's 11, I think. So they're both past their end of life, and they're both they're both tired and in difficult shape. Now we're hoping to turn one into reserve, and again, in the model that we're proposing in the referendum request, one of those will move down south while we're working on getting a replacement, but it'll have a little bit of life left in it. All of this will ultimately result in the addition of one ambulance the size of our fleet. Another question I got is, how long is the ramp up for the addition service requested? So we're hoping for quick. Now, there are federal grant monies available if we can put in place some of the things that we're talking about in this referendum. So if there are things called SAFER grants, which is a federal grant to offset the cost of hiring new firefighters. The issue with the SAFER grant, and it's a fairly easy grant to get, but in order to get it, you have to be able to produce evidence that you can sustain keeping them once they get hired. So through this and through the referendum, that would afford us the opportunity to be able to provide that proof that we can sustain the employment, and then we can use that offset in the meantime to do some of the build out of the stuff that we're proposing. We anticipate, if approved, starting on the Southside Station construction relatively soon. Hire probably one additional member per shift to get those people trained up so that they can be a little bit more veteran, because again, in our application, our people are required to have a wide range of specialties. So it's not simply hiring somebody that's only a paramedic or getting a contracted service in here that will provide us paramedics. We also have to be able to jump to an engine. We have to be able to jump to a brush truck. We have to be able to jump to a dive vehicle. We have to be able to know and perform rural operations, which is a big deal to most of our community. So having all of those specialties and hiring someone, starting to get them trained up, because when we would start outfitting that station, it would be a 3-person crew. So they can do that jump company concept that I've been talking about. And you can't just hire 3 new people and put them down there. There's a certain level of knowledge and expertise that has to go with whoever you're putting down there as the person in charge and getting those people trained up. So we anticipate the entire ramp up to get this done being a couple of years, keeping in mind that the new rate will take effect and in next year's taxes. So a lot of this build out will happen, and then which will expend the reserves we have will be dependent on some federal grant funding to accomplish vehicles and build out at the Southside Station. And the rate and amount of money that we're asking for is not to do any of that. The amount and rate that we're asking for is to run the operation once we get going. Okay, so outsourcing, again, which has been a big topic of conversation. The complication with outsourcing, first of all, several of our neighbors, Carroll Stream, is outsourced their paramedics and are actually doing away with that. I think they actually officially did do away with that. Oak Brook is doing away with their outsourcing. Warrenville is doing away with their outsourcing, I believe, and some other agencies are investigating as well. The complication isn't the people. The complication is oftentimes those people are entering into the fire service and they get those jobs as paramedics on contracts with local fire districts or fire departments while they're pursuing a full-time employment opportunity at whatever fire department or fire protection district. So a lot of those positions, both part-time people, and some of us that still have them, and contract services, those typically aren't long-term employees. So and again, going back to our model with respect to the amount of expertise they have in the fields they have to have, that's really difficult for us to be able to provide all of that level of training and expertise on someone that's not a long-term employee. So one of the things that we examined in this process was cost versus effectiveness. And again, going back to that analysis of the ability for those people in that jump company and proposed Southside Station to be able to respond to the medic unit, if an EMS call comes in, respond in a fire unit if the fire call comes in. Now it's a brush fire in that big forest preserve area down at the south side. Now a dive call comes in, which is, it takes literally years to get someone trained up to be a competent rescue diver. Swift water is quicker, but it also involves additional training, and that's something that we do a lot of. And like I said, I'm sorry to say that we do a lot of work in water rescue. But for all of those reasons, to have that workforce that's trained up and able to do all of those different roles is a more stabilized workforce. So that's the reason behind that approach that we're investigating and taking. Another question, how many more additional administrative staff? So currently we have me. We have an administrative assistant that handles everything from human resources, payroll, clerical, accounting, day in and day out accounting. And that's the administrative staff. We have had a deputy chief's position as well, which is currently unfilled, but we're working on trying to get that position filled, who also handles a little bit of the day-to-day operations and the fire prevention part, because unlike a lot of our neighbors, we don't have a fire marshal. And we don't have the additional administrative staff. What we're calling for will not add any administrative staff. And I want to be clear about that. There's no part of the referendum request that we're seeking that's going to add administrative staff to the head count. This is all for the people on the street and the stuff to support the people on the street to respond to your calls. All right, so why do the firemen make so much money? So actually, I have an interesting thing. I just got this and I printed it out in case the question came up. I got this, and I did not create this document. This was shared with me from a fire chief and another agency. So, because they're doing a salary study because they're going into contract negotiations themselves. Currently, a topped out, so firefighters and most of us have union organizations, including Winfield. So the way people will get hired at a starting pay, and then by the union contracts in this area, there's steps until they top out. So a topped out firefighter in Carroll Stream base pay makes $21,000 more than a Winfield firefighter, according to this study. A topped out firefighter in Wheaton makes $15,000 more than a Winfield firefighter, according to the study. West Chicago, $10,000 more. Bloomingdale, $17,000 more. Roselle, $11,000 more. So actually, our firefighters and our lieutenants are making less than their counterparts in the area. In some cases, considerably less than our firefighters. And that's all part of going back to the rates that we charge and the amount of tax money that we receive, and being in many cases half, or many more cases less than half of our neighboring agencies. Well, how do you manage to do it? How we manage to do it is extending the life of our fleet, driving rigs past their expected life expectancy, letting our stations and facilities get a little more tired than they should be, stretching dollars, having the life expectancy in our turnout gear going past the recommended life expectancy, the compensation package, and our union working with us and understanding our financial situation and be willing to work for less. All of those things is how we have managed to get by all of these years, and it's a compliment to us for trying to really be as diligent with your money as we can. Any other questions?
Yeah, I have one. Is
Perfect.
there a, no, that would be stupid to ask it that way. This is a really huge amount of increase in our taxes. Would it have been possible to ask for, say, half of that amount, and maybe more people would be willing to pay it?
That's an excellent question. Thank you so much for asking it. And because it's been asked before, I have a really good and comprehensive answer for you if you're willing. So the tax cap took effect in 1991. So in 1991, we didn't have around-the-clock staffing. We didn't need at that point around-the-clock staffing, and the call volume and the community growth and all of that other stuff happened, and we quickly got to what we needed to start staffing around the clock. The rate that took effect when the tax cap took place kind of set that. So this is, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, our 13th request, and we have asked for incremental increases all the way along, and unfortunately, we have not yet had a successful referendum passed. So over the span of that time, we have continued to lose ground financially compared to other places. So the amount of that increase from referendum to referendum continued to increase. And then on top of that, the call demand, now that we've established the fact that we need to add an additional company for all of the reasons that everyone is aware of, and I don't know that there's any disagreement about the fact that we need to add staff. It's just how. So all of that stuff has led us to the point where we are. So to that point, I actually, I think we can write on the board here. So the average house price in Winfield is about, according to the census data, about $300,000. So how taxes get computed, essentially, I'm a little oversimplifying it, but work with me. So essentially, the market value of your house is $300,000. Taxes get charged at a rate for the assessed valuation, which is essentially 1/3 of the value of your house. So actually, the assessed value of that $300,000 house for the county is $100,000. So our rate, or our neighbor's rate, is like, our rate is 0.36, or we refer to it as 36 cents. So Winfield is 36 cents. Carroll Stream is, I think, 76 cents currently. Let me look. Again, this data is on our website. I would encourage everyone to go look. I don't want to be incorrect here. Yeah, 76 cents. I'm rounding to the 10th. So, and West Chicago is at 92. So that and this is per $100 of assessed valuation. So that $100,000 house divided by 100 is $1,000. $1,000 for Winfield equates to about $360 that people pay every year in taxes to us, property taxes for their home. By comparison, Carroll Stream, that number is $760 every year. West Chicago, $920. The increase that we're asking for is to 64 cents, so that would be $640. Again, for essentially moving from 2 crews, an engine crew and a medic crew, to that additional jump company on the south side, which is a big jump in terms of the footprint of our organization. And we're still doing it for $120 less than Carroll Stream, and what, $270 less than West Chicago. So while it is a big relative increase, and it is a big relative increase, we're still working very hard to be as efficient in operation and as efficient in organization as we can. And that goes back to the jump company concept. To be able to do what we do with firefighters that come in the morning and put their gear by the fire engine, then regardless of if a fire call comes in or if an EMS call comes in, they respond on that engine. So that, which then requires more companies, because to meet call demands, we're continuing to be as efficient as we can by having that flexibility of being able to respond in the appropriate vehicle for the appropriate call, which is how we can manage for the long term. And the request is for a long-term solution. This is a 20-year solution. This is a 20+ year solution. This money is a structural repair, a generational improvement to our ability to deliver service to our customers, our community. And that number, using the flexibility model that we are proposing to be able to do better, smaller, is how we can arrive to do it for still less than our neighbors, and be able to provide top level service. And this will also include no debt. Question. Question, why can't you just sell the property on County Farm Road to take care of our needs? So precisely what I was just talking about is, and again, another question that I've seen posed on social media is, why, the tax rate is forever. Well, the crews are forever. So this isn't a one and done thing. We're not paying, if we were to sell the property on County Farm Road, we anticipate that would pay for roughly 2 months worth of our operational expenses. That's not enough to pay for a crew for years moving forward. So that would be a short-term solution. The property itself was purchased before it was farmland, and then when they were putting in a subdivision, on a recommendation from a study we had conducted in terms of station placement, which again you can find one on our website, that would be an ideal place. A staffed Station 2 at Roosevelt Winfield and a staffed station on County Farm Road would be the ideal solution to cover all of our district within those time parameters we were talking about. So it was purchased in advance of those houses being built there, because after those houses were built there, where do you put a station if we have to move from downtown Winfield? For those of you that have been in town and seen us turn out on a call on a Wednesday afternoon, it can be a little hairy in this intersection getting out. We will continue to do what we do and continue to turn out of here. But seeing what's going on in downtown Winfield and what the future might bring, we needed to have the ability to relocate. That was why that property was purchased in the first place. And then going back to the original question a moment ago, in order to meet our strategic need of that third company and having our ability to respond better to our own calls, at this point in time, do I want to come to the folks and go, oh, on top of that, we need to have a bond issue for a $7 million fire station, when we can do just fine for the foreseeable future out of the two facilities we have. We thought that was a financially more reasonable alternative to tell our people, trying to keep us as fiscally responsible as possible. Is there any more questions? Oh, if approved, how long until you come back for more money? I mentioned that a minute ago. This is a generational change. This is a decades-long solution. So I have no expectation, and I won't, as long as this number will last decades, and won't be coming back. There are agencies out there. There are other fire districts, and there are other fire districts that aren't too far from here that have a philosophy. If they'll go back, they'll go to their public and say, we need 10 cents for this. And then a few years later, well, we need another 10 cents for this. Well, another 10 cents a couple of years later. This is not that. We're not posing that. This is a long-term structural fix. Any other questions? Okay, I don't see any. So with that said, I would encourage everyone, please reach out to the fire district, reach out to me. My contact information is on, you know where the fire station is located, the corner of Winfield and Highlight. My email is sevans@winfieldfbe.org. Phone number to the station is 630-653-5050. Get a hold of me. You can ask me anything you want. And even if you have a question about how do I want to get rid of an extinguisher, you know, are our smoke detectors still good? Where do we need to put a CO detector on us? Any question at all, we're your fire department, we're here for you. Come in at your convenience, ask us anything you want, anytime you want, we're here for you. So with that said, thank you everyone for joining us. Any questions, feel free to reach out and ask always, and have a good rest of your Saturday.
Thank you.